I want to get very serious and talk about financial pressures that are now on Australian families and address the question of poverty in this country. Now, famously, former Prime Minister Bob Hawke, during his election speech, I think it was held at the Sydney Opera House back in 1987, during an election campaign, pledged that no Australian child would be living in poverty by 1990. Have a look.
By 1990, no Australian child will be living in poverty.
Look, I've got no doubt that Bob Hawke believed what he was saying and would have tried his hardest to live up to the promise. But as history shows, Bob Hawke failed. He didn't fail at many things. Indeed, we still have poverty in Australia, and we still have many children living that way. And our current economic problems are set to make that even worse. It's almost impossible to believe, isn't it, in a country as rich as Australia, that we have people living in the backseat of their cars. I've heard stories of women with 3 children living for months in a car. They live in tents in caravan parks, and in the worst case, we have people living on the streets of our major capital cities. Now, after 20 or more years of economic growth, fuelled, of course, by rich exports of mineral wealth and export trade with countries like China, along came COVID, then along came the Ukraine war, and we, Australia, were not insulated enough to avoid what increasingly is looking like a possible recession. Now, I don't want to be alarmist, but that looks like where we're headed. Australians born after about, I'd say, 1985 have never known the sort of hard times that we are currently living, and it's going to get worse. I was prompted to look at the pain of poverty watching this charity ad, which currently runs on television stations right around the country.
Is it okay that because of poverty, so many good Australian kids are being left so far behind? Amazing kids like Jason, caring for his sick mother, means there's no time for homework. It's not okay, and he desperately needs help. Is it okay that little Annie dreads going to school with a tired, worn-out uniform? Dreads being teased and being left out? No, it's not okay. But she's just one of the 1.2 million young Australians currently living in poverty. These kids do their best. Their teachers are trying to help them, but without extra support, they will continue to fall behind. They need you to give them the chance at life that they deserve. Just call 1-800-572-084 and sponsor an Australian child with the Smith family. You'll make sure your sponsored child has a proper school uniform and the after-school support they need to help them catch up. Please do it now, because it's not okay for any child to be left behind because they are poor.
Powerful stuff, and it pulls at the heartstrings, and I know many of you at home would be feeling very emotional about that. It's meant to do that, but I have no doubt those scenes played out in that ad, portrayed probably by actors, what's a reality for many Australian families. It's why I get so angry when the political classes, whether they be in Sydney or Melbourne or Canberra or Brisbane, waste so much time and money and effort on things that don't make a real difference to little children like that, to real people like the families depicted in those ads. Look, as you know, I'm no bleeding heart, obviously, but surely as a country, Australia, we can do so much better and concentrate on the things that really matter, including the health and the well-being of our children. How often do we turn on Question Time in Canberra and the only issues they're talking about are climate change or The Voice, and yet we have callers like I heard on Talkback Radio today debating health choices for their children because the family budget was exhausted by the cost of living and interest rate rises. It breaks your heart, as I said. And this caller's combined family income, I can tell you, was over 6 figures. She admitted that. Bob Hawke failed in his poverty promise. The current government has failed in its power bills promise. Different aims, same result. Australian families are hurting and hurting badly. It feels a bit like the late 80s all over again. I reckon it's time the new federal government sat back and looked hard at what their priorities should be, because right now they are failing all of us.